Hello, I've just finished this drawing of the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda, and it's been a while since I did a drawing inspired by the Star Wars universe. This was a slightly larger drawing, about 10 times 14 inches in size. And as for my tools, I mostly worked with charcoal as usual. I used these woodless charcoal pencils and some vine charcoal. And in addition to that, I also used black colored pencil for some of the detail and precision work. Now let's have a look at the drawing process. First, a few words about the sketch and the composition. I worked off several reference photos for both the Baby Yoda and the Mandalorian. I studied a few of them until I decided how I wanted everything to look. So I decided to place Baby Yoda here on the left and to turn the Mandalorian's head and helmet slightly to the left, and I'm happy with the way his body posture came out. I did the sketch with a graphite pencil, and now as you can see I'm working with charcoal pencils and tortillons to blend that in. Also, what you can see is that I'm using vine charcoal to shade the background. So I decided to put down that vine charcoal in the background to have some value, to create contrast with the background and the shiny lighter parts of the Baby Yoda's and the Mandalorian's equipment, because they have a lot of these metallic shiny parts, and in order for them to really stand out I have to shade the background as well. The vine charcoal that I'm using in the background is very easy to move and manipulate because it's soft and easy to blend. So I just used some paper towels and brushes to spread that around. As for the Baby Yoda's pod, obviously I had to check out a few reference photos to make sure I have all of the details, but it's not that complex. Because it's a sort of a spherical object, I have to shade it accordingly, and I also added some of these scratches and traces of damage because some of that metal is worn out, and the same goes for the Mandalorian's armor. So the thing about drawing metal equipment is that you need to produce the right kind of texture, you need to have a nice range of value, you need to have those highlights that stand out to imitate the appearance of shiny metallic parts. And of course, if the gear is and the armor is worn down and has some damage, I also have to create those indentations and scratches so that the surface, so that it looks like the metallic surface. So I also had to work a little bit on Baby Yoda's facial features to make him small and cute enough. And now I'm pretty much done with Baby Yoda and moving on to the Mandalorian and the helmet. As you can see, I'm doing much of this work with woodless charcoal pencil, and this is a medium charcoal pencil which can be sharpened pretty well, so I have no problem creating some of these thinner lines with it, but as you will see later, I will be using a black colored pencil as well. Now the thing here is that when I shade the background with vine charcoal, I sometimes can't be very precise with it, so I have to clean up the edges with the use of tortillons and erasers. So it's very important to have a clean edge between my subject and the background, so that he really stands out against the background, and so that it is clear to the viewer that these are two separate parts of the scene, two separate objects. So it's important to have those clean edges wherever an object ends. And that's the case here between the helmet and the background, and these shoulder pads and the background, etc. So I'm adding some more detail to the helmet, and as you can see, I'm using my eraser to create some of those highlights to make the helmet shiny and somewhat reflective. And now I'm working on the equipment on the arms, and again there has to be a sufficient amount of contrast with the background here as well. Also with the rifle, this part here of the rifle is going to be almost white because it's very shiny. So I really need to clean up that edge and get enough contrast between the background and that top of the tip of the rifle. So here we're moving on to the torso and the cuirass and the breastplate, as well as these belts, because he's wearing all kinds of equipment. So this is kind of complex to draw, but in the past I've already done drawings of Boba Fett, so I'm not entirely unfamiliar with Mando's gear. Plus I always find that as long as I don't have to use a ruler or measuring for anything, it's not that bad. But when I need too much precision, I'm not really happy with that. I like to work freehand mostly whenever I can. So the gloves and the hands. Another good thing that I like to do is that whenever I need to create the appearance of a metallic surface, vine charcoal can also be very useful there, because you can smudge it around very easily and it creates very little texture, so you can actually use vine charcoal to create the appearance of relatively smooth metallic surface. And then if I want to, I can add some scratches or some dents on top later. Which is what I did here with the breastplate. And if I need a texture that's a little bit more rough, then I can use my woodless charcoal pencil, which will leave a little more texture and a little more of those lines. So if I want to soften that, then I can go back in with a tortillon and soften that texture. You can see that I'm trying to clean up some of the detail and the edges with my pencil eraser and the tortillon here around those belts. But the thing is that when you're shading even some of these smaller details and smallest parts of the equipment, is that you can't just leave lines. You need to shade around each object so that you suggest that it has a thickness and volume of its own. So every line needs to mean something. Every time you put down a line, you have to make it clear what's shading what and what's standing in front of what, if that makes sense. That way you can create an illusion of depth and volume. Now here I'm shading the right side of the background, and I'm going to have to shade around the butt of this rifle to create contrast there as well, and I'm going to need a clean edge there, so I'm going to clean up that left edge of that butt of the rifle so that it stands out as a separate object and not blend in to the background. So as you can see, I cleaned it up with pencil eraser, the same as I did with the top of the rifle. And if I feel like some areas are just too smooth or don't have enough value, I can just go randomly with my pencils and add a little bit more texture, more value here and there. So the upper part of the body is mostly done. And now I'm moving on to the legs and the lower part of the body. And there's also the cape. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but I think I've pretty much done more than 2/3 of it now. I won't shade all of the background, and I won't be adding any specific detail in the background. I just want to leave it like that, like a vignette, and of course the main purpose of the background is to give me a contrast and to allow me to create more volume and depth in my characters. And by the way, I also used a gel pen, as you can see, for some of the lightest parts, where I found that I either can't clean up the details to make them completely white, or I can't clean them up so that they have a very clean edge. So in those cases I used a gel pen for some of the tiniest details, even though I generally don't like to use it. I especially don't like to use it with graphite, but I find that it works a little bit better with charcoal and with colored pencils. But the thing is that once I put down the gel pen to create those highlights, I go over them partly with my pencils to integrate them better into the rest of the drawing. Because if you just add them on top, they can stick out a little bit too much. So you have to integrate everything when you're working with the mixed media. So now this robe or cape, which is fluttering in the wind, and I have to create contrast between the lighter and darker parts, depending on which of them are facing the light source, which is coming from above and the left. So one of the things that you can see when I'm adding in that background is that I will often spoil some of the edges and make some of them blurry, but that's fine. I just go back in and clean them up. That's perfectly normal when working with charcoal. You will often find yourself covering certain things and having to clean up a little bit later, but that's just the way it is. Charcoal has many advantages, but one of the disadvantages obviously is the messiness. It just comes with the territory. And as you can see, I will create a little bit of shadow under his feet there. And this armor on the thighs has a lot of holes and scratches on it. So when you're shading these dints and these scratches, you also have to remember the light source, because if the light source is coming from above, you have to shade accordingly, and the shadow will be dropping downwards, even on these smallest, tiniest parts. So if you stay consistent with your light source, even in these smallest details, the eye will pick up on these tiny suggestions, and it will add to the realism. Because the viewer often doesn't necessarily understand everything they see, but unconsciously or subconsciously their mind picks up on these details, and they're thinking, wow, that looks like a real piece of metal, or that looks like it has some thickness. But obviously the artist has to keep these things in mind at all times. So the other arm is getting a little bit less light. It's in the shadow, so I'm shading it a little bit darker, except for a few highlights here and there. So even though this is a narrated video, I show most of it is in time-lapse, and the drawing in real time took about 5 hours or so. So it's not overly complex because I didn't put any scenery or objects in the background, but there's a lot of detail in it. So it's a decent size, fairly complex drawing. And I've also done the boots. And here, as you can see, the drawing is pretty much finished. I'm just putting down some of the finishing touches. And if the drawing seems just a little bit darker now than it did a few seconds ago, that's because here the drawing is sprayed with a fixative, and the fixative tends to add a little more value to your drawing. It tends to make it just a little bit darker, which is fine. So there's my signature. Like I said, I put down a little bit of shadow under his feet, and I'm happy with the appearance of this armor around the knees, which looks kind of shiny and metallic with some scratches and cracks in it. I'm just adding a few lines here and there, but the drawing is mostly done. If you like my drawings, please check out my other videos and subscribe, give me a like, comment. Each and every comment and like means a lot to me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.